My name is Samantha Nousak, and I serve as the Accessible Ohio Specialist in the East Central region of the state.
And my name is Alanna Smith, and I'm the Business Relations Specialist in the Northwest region of the state. So we plan for accessibility from the start. For example, we use the accessibility checker that's built into Microsoft 365 to review the resource guide and PowerPoint. We addressed color contrast, font style and size, and add alternative text known as alt text to visual images. Also, in our delivery, we'll mention each other by name as the conversation goes back and forth to indicate who is speaking. This can be helpful when attendees are receiving this information through services like American Sign Language interpretation and live captioning. So after the webinar, we edit the transcript and fix any captioning errors before uploading the webinar to our on-demand library. We also include a reasonable accommodation statement in our invitation to the webinar. So if attendees need an accommodation, they know who to contact to ask. And taking these steps up front can make this presentation more accessible and inclusive for everyone. Now I'll give an overview of today's webinar. So this webinar is the third and final session in our Disability Inclusive Workplaces series. In those sessions, we explored inclusive leadership and attracting diverse talent. In this final session, we're shifting our focus to retaining diverse talent. Today, we'll cover why retention matters, best practices for creating accessible and inclusive work environments that support long-term retention, 5 key strategies that support long-term retention. And those strategies include reasonable accommodations, training, mentorship, career advancement, and disability-focused employee resource groups, or ERGs. And finally, we'll hear from our guest speakers who will share real-world examples of how these strategies are working in their organizations. But before we dive into the content for today's webinar, I'd like to ask everyone a question, and a poll will be appearing on your screen soon. All right, so which of the following has the greatest impact on retaining employees with disabilities? Is it A, a strong culture of inclusion and belonging, B, clear and supportive accommodation process, C, opportunities for growth and advancement, D, accessible physical and digital environments? Or is it E, ongoing training and awareness for staff? And I see some of those answers coming in. Give you guys a few more seconds to get those answers in here. All right. Well, thank you all so much for responding. These are all important areas to address, and we'll cover each one during this training. Sam, would you like to get us started?
Of course, Alanna. Let's begin by talking about why retention matters, especially when we're focusing on employees with disabilities. Retention is just a general key cornerstone of good business. It can reduce costs by reducing expensive turnovers, which leave you with gaps in staffing and the need to find, hire, and train new staff. It helps maintain strong institutional knowledge, and it keeps talent at your organization. And remember, retention is more than just a metric on a report. It's a reflection of your workplace culture. When employees feel included, supported, and valued, they're more likely to stay, which benefits everyone. And when you value retention, valuing employees with disabilities pays back. We're going to highlight the benefits of an accessible workplace as a general retention strategy throughout this webinar, but it's also worth considering that employees with disabilities often stay on the job longer, and that means less turnover, lower recruitment costs, and more stability in your workforce when you prioritize accessibility and disability inclusion. Now, when we're talking retention strategies today, we're really talking about how to build a workplace where people want to stay and where they can thrive. Desirable, thriving workplaces share a common trait. They are accessible. An inclusive, accessible workplace ensures that the whole workplace, including its built and digital environment, its culture, its processes, and more, are functional for everyone. And accessibility is a great investment. A report by Accenture found that companies that prioritize disability inclusion consistently outperform their peers. These organizations experience higher revenue, stronger net income, and greater innovation. An accessible workplace can ultimately help you attract qualified candidates, increase productivity on the job, retain and advance experienced employees, and show that important information is being conveyed and expand your customer bases. Today, we're going to focus on that third point, specifically how creating an accessible and disability inclusive workplace helps you retain workers, including workers with disabilities. So, how do we create that kind of workplace? One where employees feel supported, included, and want to stay? Well, before I get into those retention strategies, it's important to understand the legal foundation that supports disability inclusion in the workplace. Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA for short, prohibits discrimination against qualified individuals with disabilities in all aspects of employment, including hiring, performing the job, and enjoying the benefits of employment. It also requires covered employers to provide reasonable accommodations to qualified individuals when they are needed. This legal framework sets the minimum standard. But today, we're going to discuss how to go beyond compliance to build a workplace that's disability inclusive and accessible for everyone. Alanna, could you please share the first step to building that disability inclusive, accessible workplace that'll retain a diverse workforce?
Of course, Sam. So the best place to start is making a plan, and OOD offers a tool that can help you get started. So our Disability Inclusive Employment Framework is a downloadable resource designed to help employers build more accessible and inclusive workplaces. And this framework includes two components. And the first is the Disability Inclusive Workplace Tool, which assesses your workplace's current strengths and identifies areas for improvement. And second, we have the Disability Inclusive Workplace Plan. And this guides the development of a strategic, actionable approach roadmap for disability inclusion. And the tool and plan collectively focus on four key areas that foster a disability inclusive workplace, including an inclusive workplace culture, recruiting, hiring, and supporting employees, workplace accessibility, and workplace accommodations. Now, we're going to be highlighting some of the strategies from the framework and how they impact employee retention throughout this webinar. However, if you're thinking that making an accessibility plan could be a next step for your business, reach out to the business relations team at OOD. We can help assist you in completing the disability inclusive workplace tool and developing your organization's disability inclusive workplace plan, ensuring that you have the support needed to achieve your disability inclusion objectives. So an accessible and disability inclusive workplace goes beyond the ADA requirements. It's about creating a culture where all employees, including employees with disabilities, feel like they belong. Accessibility means making your environments, your processes, and communications usable by as many people as possible. And when you do that, everyone benefits, including employees with disabilities.
Now, Alanna, before we dive into those 5 retention strategies of this webinar, we need to discuss the components of a disability inclusive foundation for the workplace. Taking some inspiration from OOD's Disability Inclusive Workplace Framework, we're going to provide a high-level overview of the components of physical and digital accessibility, how to plan for accessibility, thinking about accessibility for the benefits and privileges of employment, and how to measure your progress towards your goals of becoming more disability inclusive over time. Let's start by thinking about the accessibility of the physical and digital environment. When workplaces are accessible, employees are more productive, more satisfied, and more likely to stay. We have some general accessibility best practices to share for your physical built environment and the digital spaces that your employees work in. For physical built spaces, accessibility includes being familiar with the 2010 ADA standards for accessible design and how they apply to the workplace, and conducting regular accessibility assessments to evaluate spaces with inclusion in mind, such as if entrances, restrooms, and workstations are accessible. Then make modifications when it's needed. This could include installing automatic doors, adjusting workstations, or providing ergonomic equipment. Creating accessibility procedures to address these standards and the findings of your assessments will help ensure accessibility in all of your facilities. For digital spaces, accessibility means following the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG for short, which are the global standards for digital accessibility, using accessibility checkers, such as tools built into platforms like Microsoft 365, which can help to flag barriers, and testing your tools and platforms with real users. Involve people with disabilities who use assistive technologies in testing your systems to ensure they work with things like screen readers or keyboard navigation. You can also look to those WCAG guidelines, accessibility checkers, and real tests when designing and implementing digital accessibility assessments and accessibility procedures to improve and maintain your digital environment. Alanna, what's our next best practice?
Thanks, Sam. So, retaining a diverse workforce that includes people with disabilities means making sure your workplace stays accessible and inclusive over time. So, when you're planning for accessibility from the start, whether it's for a new project, event, or purchase, you're not just meeting legal requirements. You're creating an environment where employees feel supported, valued, and can contribute fully. OOD's Disability Inclusive Workplace Framework can be used to support a variety of retention-focused practices, including training your teams regularly. So you can provide trainings for staff on accessibility so they know how to support disability inclusion during meetings, events, and day-to-day operations. The next strategy is planning for accessibility with the use of checklists to identify and address barriers before they impact employees, whether it's for a team retreat, a training session, or a new software rollout. Now, another strategy to consider is communicating accessibility, making sure employees know what's available by including information about accessibility in internal communication, event invites, and training materials. Now, our next strategy, designating staff leads. So ensure someone on the team is the lead for accessibility. The designated staff lead processes requests for accommodations and helps employees know who to go to with questions. Up next, we have procurement and purchasing processes. With this strategy, you can build accessibility into your standard procedure and include accessibility requirements in vendor contracts. Now, consider establishing a fund for accessibility. Implementing this strategy can provide a budget to support accessibility projects. And last but not least, consider vendor assessments, which could be as simple as asking vendors to show how their products meet accessibility standards. These practices help you build an accessible workplace that supports and retains diverse talent. All right, so let's move on to discuss an area that may be overlooked when we talk about retention, and that's access to benefits and opportunities. It's not just about offering great benefits, it's about making sure all employees can access and use them. That includes things like training and development programs, mentorship opportunities, wellness initiatives, and even internal communications about those benefits. If these aren't accessible, whether physically, digitally, or procedurally, some employees may be unintentionally excluded. So, what can your organization do? Well, you can review benefit programs for accessibility by taking a structured look at your benefits. Are there any inaccessible formats or locations or even systems that could be a barrier for someone wanting to participate? Remove identified barriers. Once you've identified the barrier, take action. That may mean updating material, offering alternative formats, or adjusting how programs are delivered. You can also include accommodations in your benefits process. Make sure your reasonable accommodation process covers access to benefits and privileges of employment, not just job duties. And this could include things like training sessions, mentorship programs, and employee events. And finally, communicate these benefits in accessible ways. This includes using plain language, large print, caption videos, or screen reader friendly programs. And when employees feel supported, they know they have access to the same benefits, they have the same access to opportunities and resources as their peers, and they're more likely to stay and grow and thrive in your organization. Sam, how do organizations know if their efforts are actually working?
Well, Alina, that is where measurement comes in. Tracking the progress of your efforts helps you to understand what is working, identify areas for improvement, prioritize your next steps, and strengthen your retention strategies over time. To support the measurement process, OOD's Disability Inclusive Workplace Framework can be a useful tool. It can help you identify current strengths, uncover important gaps, and prioritize those next steps. If you complete the tool on a regular basis, you can also use that to see your improvements in the organization year over year. And remember, when you're tracking your progress over time like this, you're not just checking a box. You're building a workplace that truly supports retention. And for all of these accessibility best practices, remember that you don't have to figure it out alone. The Disability Inclusive Workplace Framework is available to you at no cost, which is our practical tool to help you assess where you are and make a plan that fits your organization. And if you're looking for more details on how to build an accessible workplace, connect with your regional Accessible Ohio specialist or business relations specialist. We can help you with assisting learning about these different topics, utilizing the framework, and provide targeted education on topics like digital accessibility, utilizing ADA tools, and more. Now, I would like to pause here to ask everybody another question. In this one, you're going to put your responses into the chat. What is something that you have recently discovered, tried, or learned that supports a more disability inclusive workplace? It could be a new tool, a training, or even some small shift in how your team is communicating. We'd really love to hear what's working or what you're currently exploring. So please go ahead and drop those comments in the chat. Just give everybody that moment to type. Oh, okay, I see one person saying Teams live closed captioning. Yes, I love those. I use them for all of my meetings. Raising awareness, that's always an important step. Attending some trainings. And yes, we've got another shout out for closed captions, the closed captions fan and training getting another shout out. And more for training and reading documents and web pages. I'm glad that you guys have found so many things. Oh, they're all coming in now. Using the accessibility tools. Oh, we've got a disability ERG. We're going to talk about those in a little bit and more stuff on trainings. Those are all great insights. Thank you so much for sharing. This highlights all of the different ways that disability inclusion can show up in our workplace. Now, Elena, we've laid the foundations of creating an accessible and disability inclusive workplace, including OOD's no-cost tool, physical and digital accessibility, inclusive planning, access to benefits for all, and measuring your progress. Can you now get into those key retention strategies?
Yes, Sam. So we're going to build on that foundation by introducing 5 key strategies that help organizations retain diverse talent, including employees with disabilities. And these strategies are practical and deeply connected to fostering a workplace where people want to stay and grow. So we have reasonable accommodations, training, mentorship, career advancement, and disability-focused employee resource groups, or ERGs. And each of these strategies plays a unique role in creating a workplace where employees with disabilities can succeed and choose to stay.
Well, Elena, I'll start us off by talking about reasonable accommodations. Employers covered under Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, are required to provide reasonable accommodations to qualified individuals with disabilities when they are needed. A reasonable accommodation is a change in the workplace that removes a barrier and enables an individual with a disability to apply for a job, perform the essential functions of a job, or enjoy the benefits and privileges of employment. Examples are going to include things like screen readers, flexible work schedules to attend medical appointments, materials provided in Braille, and providing sign language interpretation. These can all ensure that individuals with disabilities access employment as equitably as individuals without disabilities. To fulfill these responsibilities and foster a culture where employees feel comfortable to ask for what they need, I've got 4 main ideas to share. The first is to create a formal process for navigating the reasonable accommodation process. This includes having a policy that outlines and describes the steps for requesting, implementing, and monitoring accommodations. Next, include safeguards to ensure the confidentiality of disclosing a disability, requesting an accommodation, and navigating the reasonable accommodation process, such as storing disability-related records in a separate location than your other personnel documents. Third, train your supervisors on how to recognize a request for accommodations, what steps to take next, and the role that they have in supporting the interactive process. And finally, include some kind of process to plan for requests. This means being proactive to identify workplace barriers and remove them, as well as planning for the cost of accommodations in a centralized fund. It can also include providing some accommodations for all employees without the requirement of disclosing a disability and navigating the interactive process, such as allowing flexible schedules, providing ergonomic keyboards, or even noise-canceling earbuds or headphones to anybody who asks for them. Alanna, tell us about our next strategy.
Well, Sam, training can support fostering a disability inclusive workplace culture, which ultimately can support retaining a qualified workforce. I have a few types to share with you. So, we just talked about training supervisors about reasonable accommodations and their role in the process. In addition, it's important to train all employees on the right to reasonable accommodations and your reasonable accommodation process. It's common to include this in the onboarding process, but also helpful to repeat on a regular basis so all employees remain aware of these rights. An employee might not need an accommodation when they're first hired, but changes in their job or condition over time may create that need. And others may develop a disability later due to an injury or aging and then require an accommodation. So we talked in the beginning of this webinar about creating an accessible workplace. Accessibility is part of everything we all do, and everyone has the opportunity to positively impact it. So it's all important to train all staff and all employees on why accessibility matters and their role in creating an accessible workplace. So in this, addressing, prioritizing accessibility from the start, identifying barriers, and knowing how to make environments accessible. Next, include training on disability etiquette and awareness. This training helps all employees interact respectfully and confidently with colleagues and disability people with disabilities, which promotes a culture where everyone feels welcomed and valued. Whether it's a help desk ticket or collaborating on a work project, training on disability etiquette really helps ensure every interaction is handled with respect. Now, the good news is you don't have to create these trainings from scratch. OOD offers no-cost trainings on a range of topics from reasonable accommodations, workplace accessibility, and disability etiquette. And our offerings include in-person trainings and a library of on-demand webinars that can be viewed and complemented with a few questions and answer session. And this can be facilitated by your local business relations specialist or Accessible Ohio specialist. And we're here to help, so reach out at any time. Sam, could you discuss our third strategy?
Absolutely, Alanna. Mentorship programs can make a big difference for individual employees and for your organization as a whole. When employees have someone they can turn to for guidance, encouragement, and support, they're more likely to feel connected to their workplace. That sense of connection and belonging can be a factor in whether employees choose to stay and grow with an organization. Mentorship can help to promote career advancement by helping employees recognize career paths, prepare for growth opportunities, and navigate workplace dynamics more effectively. They can build loyalty and trust by showing that the organization is invested in their development and overall success. And it provides both personal and professional support, which can be especially meaningful for navigating challenges in the workplace. Mentorship connects employees with disabilities to leaders, peers, and allies across the organization. Mentorship also encourages knowledge sharing, which is beneficial across departments, generations, and lived experiences. It provides an opportunity to identify and showcase skills, achievements, and career goals. And finally, as we learned in the first session of this series, mentorship encourages inclusive leadership. Mentors in leadership roles gain firsthand insight into barriers and opportunities, making them more likely to champion accessibility and inclusion in broader organizational efforts. Now, to ensure your mentorship process is accessible, use effective communication practices and apply the strategies we've discussed, such as using plain language and providing accessible materials. Additionally, by permitting flexibility in how and when mentorship meetings occur, you can make the process work for various schedules and various needs. Ultimately, when mentorship is implemented with accessibility in mind, it can strengthen the workplace culture, reinforce your commitment to inclusion, and foster growth in the workplace. Which naturally brings me to our next topic of professional advancement. Creating disability inclusive pathways for professional growth not only supports retention, but it also helps your organization build a stronger, more diverse workforce, one where employees with and without disabilities can thrive. A disability inclusive pathway for career advancement doesn't just offer opportunities, it ensures that those opportunities are accessible to everyone, including employees with disabilities. This means proactively removing barriers, offering accommodations, and access in mind. Here are some ways you can make sure that those career advancement opportunities are disability inclusive and accessible to everyone. First, when you're offering tuition assistance programs, ensure that communications about this benefit are available in accessible formats, such as screen reader friendly PDFs with large print and language. Also, make sure to include a reasonable accommodation statement in all of your materials. Next, for in-house training programs, make sure that you include a clear, reasonable accommodation statement and registration materials. Additionally, ensure that training content is accessible, such as providing captioned videos, checking your slide decks for accessibility, and confirming the physical accessibility of training rooms. When career development opportunities are offered, whether it's cross-training or attending conferences, ensure that promotional materials are accessible and include accommodation contacts. Additionally, consider offering some virtual or hybrid options for those with mobility or health-related needs. Finally, offer clearly defined career ladders. You should be using inclusive, plain language in your job descriptions and ensure that the essential functions of the job are outcome-based and written using inclusive language. For example, focus on the outcome of a task rather than how it's typically done to allow for flexibility and accommodations. The consistent accessibility threads across all of these advancement strategies are effectively communicating about the offering and remembering to include your reasonable accommodation statement. This way, if an employee with a disability encounters a barrier along their advancement path and they need an accommodation, such as sign language interpretation or modified training formats, they know who to contact and how to make that request. When employees can see a future with your organization, one where they're supported and growing and advancing, they're more likely to invest their time and their talent for the long term. Alanna, could you bring us home with strategy 5?
Sure, Sam. Another way to support inclusion and retention is by implementing disability-focused employee resource groups, or ERGs. A disability-focused ERG is a voluntary group of employees within an organization who share an interest in promoting disability inclusion in the workplace. Membership may include employees with disabilities, allies, and advocates. A disability-focused ERG provides a platform for employees to raise awareness about disability-related concerns, ensure workplace accessibility, and foster a more diverse and inclusive place to work. Now, these groups do more than just bring people together. They can be a cornerstone of your retention strategy when used intentionally. And here's how. They can foster belonging and engagement. ERGs create spaces where employees with disabilities and allies can connect, share experiences, and feel seen. This sense of community is key to retention. And they're able to offer leadership opportunities. ERGs are a great way to identify and grow internal talent. Members can lead initiatives, organize events, and represent the group in leadership conversations like building skills and visibility. They have the potential to drive innovation. When ERGs are empowered to share feedback and ideas, they often spark creative solutions that improve accessibility and productivity for everyone, including employees with disabilities. They can also create a feedback loop. ERGs can serve as a direct line to leadership, offering insight into what's working and what needs to be changed. And this helps organizations stay responsive and inclusive. To make the most of these groups, ensure they're supported by leadership with time, resources, and visibility. Include ERG insights in decision making, especially around workplace accessibility, policies, and culture. And also encourage cross collaboration with other ERGs to build a community of inclusion. As an employer, supporting a disability-focused ERG and helping them make their group and material accessible ultimately fosters an accessible workplace. Disability-focused ERGs also directly target multiple retention strategies at once, including improving accessibility in the workplace, creating professional growth opportunities, and measuring progress to your accessibility goals. They're a practical, proven way to build an accessible and effective culture that supports worker retention.
Thank you, Alanna. How about we pause here for our first question and answer session of this webinar. Again, you can use that Q&A button at the top of your screen to submit your questions. I will read and answer them as they come in. But while everybody is typing, I am going to start with a few pre-submitted questions we received before the webinar. First, we were asked, how do we launch advocacy and training for those internally to promote an inclusive work environment? Well, seem to have frozen. Not sure if anyone can hear me.
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
All right, so it's just my camera. Great.
Okay.
Well, to answer that question, it's important to obtain leadership support for launching initiatives to impact a disability inclusive culture and work environment. Leadership buy-in is going to help with providing the time and the resources needed to successfully implement these programs. If it's helpful, you can reach out to us for ideas to make these programs accessible and for the
Think we might have lost Sam there, but I think she was going to mention about making these programs accessible for trainings that we have available. So while we're waiting on Sam to join back in here, I'll move into our next question that was pre-submitted. And are there any accommodations needing to be made regarding discipline situations for people with disabilities, like when they are late or miss a shift, or after showing they can do a task repeatedly, stop doing it? So that's a good question. Low performance and misconduct issues should generally be navigated in the same for all employees, including employees with disabilities. Now, at times, low performance may be the first indication to an employee that their disability is contributing to this, and the person may choose to disclose a disability and request an accommodation. Now, if that happens, it's important to recognize the request and know what steps to take next, which is likely to connect the employee with the appropriate contact in HR to begin the interactive process. And some examples of accommodations that might be helpful to consider when requested could be related to tardiness if the modifying the start and end times of the work shift is an effective solution. So thank you guys for those questions. I don't see anything right now in the chat here, but those were great pre-submitted questions. And now we're going to get into our panelists. So we're excited to welcome our guest panelists from Crown Equipment Corporation and the City of Toledo. And they're going to share how they've implemented retention strategies in their own organizations. So today we have Valerie Fatica. Valerie is the City of Toledo's Disability Manager, serving as a liaison between the city's residents with disabilities and city government. And prior to accepting the role in 2021, she practiced law for 15 years in the areas of family law and Title III ADA litigation. And we also have Sabrina Moore, and she is the EEO and AA Compliance Manager at Crown Equipment Corporation, bringing in over 18 years of experience in compliance and regulatory leadership. Sabrina specializes in affirmative action planning, ADA compliance, and inclusive employment practices. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. So I'll read our first question. Valerie, what motivated your organization to prioritize retention strategies for all employees, including employees with disabilities?
Here at the City of Toledo, as city government, we have a lot of employees. We have about 2,700, and we know that keeping those employees is important. As some of the presentation said, keeping costs down, retaining that institutional knowledge, that's something that's really important to us. So to try and tackle that issue, one of the things we do every few years is do a climate survey and really hear from our employees what they need in the workplace, what are some issues in the workplace, what they appreciate in the workplace. And we do that through kind of surveys and some focus groups, making sure that it's in an environment where our employees feel comfortable disclosing so we can figure out, okay, it's not just leadership dictating, but what are our boots on the ground employees needing to really feel valued in the workplace and want to continue to work here?
Oh, thank you. And Sabrina, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Absolutely, and thank you for having us today. At Crown, our president emeritus has been quoted to say that bricks, mortar, and technology mean nothing without good people. And Crown really embraces that and embraces its good people, right? So we had an executive guest speaker that came in from Rite Aid, and he gave us his personal experiences. And he had a son who had autism. And in his perspective, his son was not going to be able to, one, secure employment, let alone retain employment. That seemed far-fetched at the time. But as he worked with employers and as he worked with people who were able to support his son not only secured employment, retained employment, but he was also able to live independently and on his own. So as we were listening to that, that sparked a flame that lit into a fire. So we decided we were going to take action. And in taking action, we reached out to OOD and invited them in and began to work with them to figure out how we can better support these good people. And we also reached out to our community partners such as VentureLinks and TriStar Career Pathways, Capabilities to better understand what they offer and how we could better support our community partners.
Thank you. And while I have you, Sabrina, would you share an example of a retention strategy your organization uses, such as an accommodation or mentorship or even inclusive recognition?
Yeah, here at Crown, we have what's called our Crown values, and Crown is used as an acronym. And so what we value is commitment. We value respect, opportunity, winning, and navigating. We ask this of our employees, but we also take a look back and say, how can Crown also commit to our employees, respect, give them opportunity, help them to win, and navigate through everyday situations and ideas that we have. So one of the things that we've done is we have dedicated resources for ADA, and we have dedicated team members who work with employees with different abilities to understand what their needs are and understand what their challenges are. We have an ADA budget that helps with specific needs that they may have. So we have that budget in place that you guys mentioned before. We've increased our employer contribution with our medical plans and also increased our EAP and behavioral health services and the visits that are approved under there, the free visits that are approved. We've had opportunities and open opportunities for mentorship, education, succession planning, talent development planning, and tuition reimbursement.
Right, love that. Valerie, did you have any additional thoughts on that?
So kind of like Sabrina said, we also have wonderful benefits to support our employees, medical, dental, vision, and an EAP that is for all employees to access. We have a really solid accommodation process that has been applied consistently so that employees are getting the same process every time. And that is something that we always have an accommodation statement on our programs and services so that employees know that they can request an accommodation at any time. One of the things we have here is an employee engagement Toledo to support our employees. So they do things like have there's a monthly newsletter to recognize employees who are going above and beyond and really support the ground level employees. We also try to highlight a employee with a disability during National Disability Employment Awareness Month, getting that messaging out that we are willing and able to hire employees with disabilities. We try to grow our skills of our employees with professional development opportunities. And we also offer tuition reimbursement as well so that you can grow professionally and hopefully we keep that talent in our organization.
Okay, and while I have you, Valerie, how do you ensure accommodations remain effective as employees' needs evolve over time?
Sure. So this is something within our process, it's built in that this, whether it's for a temporary disability or a permanent disability, your accommodation can be evaluated or changed at any time. So, and that can be triggered by either the employee or the employer to see if it's not effective anymore, we can reevaluate. So people's needs change, and even though you may not identify as a person with a disability, we're all aging, so you may acquire a disability later in life and while you're still in the workplace. So making sure that all employees know that those accommodations are available as your needs change over time is important. We also have a regular review of those accommodations, whether or not somebody asked for it or not, just to kind of check in and make sure those accommodations are effective. It could be just annually, or if it's a temporary disability, it may be more frequent as your condition changes.
Right. Okay, and Sabrina, are there any points you'd like to add to that?
Similar to Valerie, she's hit a lot of great points, but in Crown, what we have is kind of a case management style way of operations with the ADA accommodation. So we are making sure that we're interacting with HR, the employee, the provider, the manager, to make sure that we are eliminating any barriers that they may have. We understand that one size doesn't fit all, and that we are looking specifically for what is going to help them to be the most successful. So in doing that, just like Valerie said, the accommodations can be modified at any period of time, but we do have a policy or a practice that we use to make sure that we're reviewing these accommodations on an annual basis to ensure that, one, they're still working, two, that it's working just like Valerie said for the employee and the employer, and just understanding if any developments have happened within that. Even when you start off with a disability, developments happen throughout the life cycle and could change, and so we just want to make sure that we recognize that and we're assessing those.
Thank you. Sounds like the common theme there is reevaluation.
Right.
So, Sabrina, I still have you here. When talking about professional development and advancement, what steps have you taken to remove barriers for employees with disabilities?
Some of the things that we do to make sure that we continue to make assessments and make sure that there's no additional barriers in there is that every 3 years we conduct a full job description analysis, and we go out and we actually review the actual work that is being completed. And we look at those and measure those against what is stated in the job qualifications and the physical requirements, because as you guys know, as technology advances, as processes change, we want to make sure that it's an accurate reflection of what's needed within that specific job. We will also provide tuition reimbursement for any educational opportunities that they might want, and that's for all employees. We do assessments to ensure our internal trainings are accessible, just like you all said, just to make sure that when they are engaging in training activities, it's in a format that doesn't have any created barriers, artificial barriers that we could remove. We also want to make sure that when we're doing trainings, prior to the training, we're reaching out and saying, hey, if anybody needs an accommodation, reach out to us, and we will be happy to plan for that and implement that prior to them doing the training. We also hire and promote based on the most qualified person for the position without bias. And we teach that in our interviewing and hiring classes that all supervisors have to take so that they understand what that means and what that looks like.
Thank you. And Valerie, is there anything you'd like to mention?
Yeah, so this is something that has been repeated as ad nauseum, but that accommodation statement really is important to know that with every process that your employees have the opportunity to be accommodated. One thing I mentioned earlier is that we're a big organization, about 2,700 employees, but we also have a lot of different departments. So although I'm the ADA coordinator, I don't know what's going on in the water department or with police every day. So one thing that we've created is an accessibility management team, and we meet quarterly with representatives from each department that are interested in these kinds of things. So we share what's going on generally in those departments and troubleshoot any accessibility issues. And really, it's a collaborative way to try to make all of our departments and all of our city services and programs more accessible. One of the things that we've offered through our HR department for professional development is a flat amount to give to employees to use for professional development so that they can choose what best accommodates them, whether they need to have a disability or not, to find the best fit for them to be able to grow in their profession. Again, that tuition reimbursement allows a lot of autonomy with the employee as well, obviously job related, but to be able to choose what program's really going to help them as well. The other thing that's important when you're talking about advancement and development is maintaining that confidentiality about whether an employee has a disability or not. It's their decision whether to disclose that. So if you're the one providing accommodations, you should make sure that their disclosure of a disability isn't disclosed to anyone that doesn't need to know.
Right, absolutely. And now, Valerie, while you and Sabrina may not per se have a disability inclusive employee resource group, what role has an ERG or a similar initiative played in helping to foster a sense of belonging and support retention efforts?
So one of the things that the city has been working on, and it was quite a long process, is if we had values before, nobody knew about them, and nobody knew that to communicate them. So the city engaged its employees to develop shared values that we all have. And we've undergone training on those values. What do they mean? How do we put those values in action so that we can cultivate that culture and also communicate that to both current employees and job applicants so that they know what we're about and how we can really hopefully change the culture in our workforce in aligning with those shared values.
All right. And Sabrina, your thoughts?
I think everyone who was responding to the Q&A really honed in on a key thing, and that is training, right? So training our employees, training other managers and supervisors, doing that disability etiquette, making sure you have pulse surveys to see how people feel about belonging within their organization, offering them educational opportunities themselves. But also we engaged with the OOD to do some windmills training, and we did train the trainer and just try to make sure that we are offering training to everyone to make sure that everybody's starting with on the same page with the same information, foundational information, and treating each other with respect and making sure that we're committed again to our values, committed, respect, opportunities, winning, and navigating to ensure that all employees are treated with respect.
Thanks, Sabrina. And so I do have one final question, Sabrina. If an employer is just getting started with disability inclusive retention strategies, what is one piece of advice you'd like to share to help them take their first step?
Elena, I don't just have one piece. I got a couple of things. One of the things that I would say is remember that one size does not fit all. When you're talking about accommodations, each situation, each circumstance is different. Each barrier is different. Don't go in there assuming that you know what the barrier is and assuming that you know how to fix it. One thing that you might think is a barrier is not a barrier to them. They're thinking about something totally different, right? So we want to make sure that we're open and understanding that one size doesn't fit all. The other thing is many people will focus on all the reasons why something won't work. And I challenge you guys to focus on all the reasons why it will work, right? All the reasons why we can get this done. We can remove these barriers. We can create an environment of belonging. How can we do this rather than why it won't work? And the third piece is that empathy is wonderful. It's great, but sometimes it has its flaws. So when you are empathizing with somebody, you're trying to put yourself in their situation and understand from that perspective. But you don't want to limit yourself in that and saying that if I were in that situation, I couldn't do it because you couldn't figure out how to do it. But don't assume that they don't already have it figured out, or that there's already something out there to be used, technology or anything else that is out there that other people can use. So don't let empathy hold you back either. So it's a way to establish belonging, but we don't want that to limit you as well.
Right. And Valerie, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on what Sabrina said, which is a great answer. Starting with that open mind is probably the most important first step. You may have stereotypes about people with disabilities or look at someone and think what they can do, but people with disabilities adapt every day to a world that's not built for them. So having that open mind, having that flexibility is really the most important first step. Also, gathering information. You don't know what you need. Well, your employees might know. So getting those surveys and focus groups and just establishing that dialogue with your employees is going to be important to know, what do I need to keep these employees here so that they continue to support and grow with the organization. The other thing Sabrina also mentioned is train regularly, not just having one disability training and then be done with it. Having that regular reinforced training, sometimes more specialized, like we have a special training for supervisors on recognizing when an employee needs an accommodation and more detail about what that process looks like. OODs, Centers for Independent Living, there's a lot of resources out there for that training, but continuing to do that on a regular basis, not just for new employees, but to reinforce those things with your current employees is a good step as well.
Thanks, Valerie. And thank you both, Valerie and Sabrina, for your insight and your time joining us today. We really appreciate having you guys come out, give us real life examples, and giving that valuable input to help us and the employers take their next steps. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And it looks like Sam is back with us. Hey,
I
Sam.
am. Hello, Alanna.
So, to respect everyone's time, I know we saw that 5 minute timer kicking up there. To respect everyone's time, we're going to conclude today's webinar, but we will stay a few minutes after the presentation to address questions we didn't have time to answer. So, if you do need to leave, no worries. This will be archived with the rest of the presentation and posted on the employer page of OOD's website with remaining webinars in our on-demand library. So Sam, would you like to wrap things up?
I would love to, Alanna. Today, we discussed the business case for retaining employees with disabilities, covered best practices for creating accessible and inclusive workplaces, reviewed 5 key strategies that employers can implement to retain employees with disabilities, and we heard real-world examples from our guest panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today.